Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, the major motion podcast, where we talk about the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm John Gurney, film editor for InBetweenDrafts.com, and from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he's a freelance film writer, and his name is Will Ashton.
Actually, that's classified.
Will Ashton, don't do that. Don't jump off that cliff.
Aw, man. But, no, I mean, yeah, it's good to see you so soon after our last.
What do you mean? Our last recording? What? Oh, because this episode is probably not going to come out until a few days removed.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, in a matter of speaking, I'm going to be on Ghost Protocol next week. I
mean, speaking of a joyride, there's more of those in this movie than...
Yeah, I'm going to be away next week, so thankfully this movie came out kind of early. So I got to see it sooner than I thought and had the chance to talk about it with you right now.
That is the case. We're talking about Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, seventh film in the Mission Impossible franchise. Very fun franchise for pretty much anybody who grew up with like James Bond movies, and the Mission Impossible movies are kind of like our American, or the Mission Impossible. It's like not American James Bond, that's reductive, but I don't know. It's a little bit more American adjacent, a little bit more extreme and over the top. Tom Cruise has always been Ethan Hunt in these movies, right? And I don't know, because we have talked about Mission Impossible. We talked about Fallout when that came out in 2018. But did we ever talk about the TV show, like the Mission Impossible show? Like, did you ever watch that?
No, I have not.
I think I saw like a little bit of it.
You're talking about the one that's like from the 60s?
Yeah.
Yeah, I never saw it. I mean, I think it is fascinating to me that the first movie takes the protagonist of that film, or that show, I mean, and just decides, hey, he's going to be the villain.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting.
Yeah, ask me.
And I feel like that would have been like super mind blowing, if I had grown up with the show. But to me, But no, it's definitely a cool, ballsy idea for the film.
When we did talk about Fallout, we ranked them, like the Mission Impossible movies. I think we had, I don't rewatch these movies often. I think I'm going to before part 2 of Dead Reckoning. But I think I've only seen all these movies once, except for the second one and the first one. First one I've seen like twice. Second one I've seen like 220 times. And third one I've seen 2 times. And then all the other ones, like from Ghost Protocol on, I just saw once and was like, these movies are cool. I still like Fallout the best. Like, I think that movie is just like number one. Maybe part 2 of Dead Reckoning will take it over, but I mean that it has a high cliff to climb. And I think you had similar rankings to me, I want to say. I'd have to dig back into the archive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not exactly sure where I would have ranked the films, but yeah, I mean, I will say I know I rewatched them prior to Fallout. Fallout and this new one are the only ones I've seen just once. But the first Mission Impossible, I'm pretty sure I've seen like 4 or 5 times at this point. I rewatched it before this movie because of all the connections to this previous, the first one and then this one, which was a very rewarding rewatch for me. Not only because it grew in my appreciation. I feel like the last time I saw it, I was a little caught up in like the dated technology and kind of like some of the goofy choices they made. But this time I was really just caught up with how much of a Brian De Palma movie it is. Mm-hmm. And also just like how like slick and kind of simplistic and just pulpy it is. And just the way that De Palma is able to take his classic voyeuristic lens and incorporate it into this kind of soon to be iconic film franchise. I do really miss the sort of like exquisite corpse aspect of the Mission Impossible films, where like each director, kind of similar like to the Alien franchise, would kind of take the property and kind of put their own artistic spin on it. I think that is something I kind of miss when McQuarrie kind of became the de facto director of the Mission Impossible films. But then I was also thinking about it, and maybe even I said this, I don't know if in the Fallout review, but I feel like the true author of this franchise is ultimately Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I think we both have said that. He's like the shadow director.
Well, not only in that sense, but like, I mean, he's the main producer, and I just feel like the journey of the Mission Impossible films is very reminiscent of like where Tom Cruise has been as a movie star over the past 20, nearly 30 years now. And I feel like each of these films in their different time period kind of just picked who he is and what he wants to represent as a movie star and as maybe even as a person.
Hey, like, what is Mission Impossible 3 if not him processing his breakup with Katie Holmes?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's kind of what that would be Mission Impossible 2. Being like divorced with John Woo, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
Second one, I think the second one's speaking more to his Nicole Kidman days, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we're getting the timelines up in a
okay. Is that what you didn't say Nicole Kidman?
No, well, I said Katie Holmes is the Mission Impossible 3 one where he's married to a
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But then that makes Mission Impossible 4 him divorced from Katie Holmes.
You got there eventually.
Yeah, I mean, what I do like about I mean, obviously there's a lot of things I like about Ghost Protocol, but one thing I like is that like there's a kind of idea in there like, all right, Tom is back, but he kind of needs to reclaim his image, and also we're gonna have him kind of passing the torch over to the next generation, which is Jeremy Renner. And then like Rogue Nation is just kind of like, yeah, he's around, but no, I'm still keeping the torch. That's all me. And then he doesn't even come back for whatever Fallout and this new one. So yeah, I just think it's kind of fascinating that like, yeah, it was like
they might have had him come back, but I think his accident might have gotten in the way. I don't know for sure. I'm just speculating, but
I feel like this would have been in post by the time Renner would have had the accident. So I don't think that was a factor in it. I could be wrong. I have no idea.
I mean, I'm just thinking of also there is part 2, right? Because they did these movies around the same time, but I don't know if the timelines totally match up. So
sure. So that is in post, right? The second one.
I believe so, but I don't know for sure.
Okay, but yeah, no, I mean that's I think that's part of the beauty of these Mission Impossible movies is that outside of like your kind of usual Hollywood attempt to kind of cash in on a bankable long running TV show, this one has served as kind of a monumental franchise for Tom Cruise star power, not only in the sense of like him trying to maintain it and then reclaim it in going into the 2000s and then like the 2010s, but also just like him now kind of feeling like he is like the savior of cinema, or like like the traditional film experience, and trying to like kind of be this like all knowing figure protecting us now from the long-standing dangers of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, he's kind of pulling a note from Minority Report in this one. It's almost kind of like he was sitting down with the writers and was like, all right, look guys, I've got this figured out. We did a movie back in the early 2000s. You might have watched it. I don't know. But it was called Minority Report. Let's just do that. And it's been 20 years. Who remembers that movie? I do like to think that Cruise is like, he fascinates me in the sense that he is your typical Hollywood celebrity who is very much distanced from the rest of like the common working person. But also he's not. Like he really understands, I think, the really pulsing heartbeat of what people want to see at the movies. We saw a promotion, right, where he's literally sitting down eating some popcorn. It's the most relatable thing I think I've seen a Hollywood celebrity do in 2023. But it's from Tom Cruise, so I'm obviously conflicted on that.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the fascinating thing about Tom Cruise, that like I feel like there's sort of like man who fell to earth aspect to him, where he kind of feels like an alien that like had some sort of mission but got distracted because of movies.
This is the movies. Isn't that the plot of one of the characters in Eternals?
Maybe.
Actually, yeah, it is. The
the Melon and Johnny plot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there is something about him that I don't know. Like, is he going to be a guy mainly because of his like Scientology background? I don't know. Is he going to be a guy who like when he passes away or like decades later, if a bunch of like nasty or like wild things are going to come out about him? Maybe. I have no idea. But I mean, like in the present, at least as a movie star and entertainer, I feel like there is really no one else like him. There is like a magnetism to him. It's not like he's like an amazing actor, but there is something about him that is just inherently very compelling. and something that he just kind of has that pull. And I feel like now, like with Top Gun Maverick and with this new movie, there is a kind of budding humility to him that I feel like hasn't really been seen in the previous like films he's produced.
Well, I think to sum up what you're saying is like he's aging well. He's 61 and he's not trying to, he is acting like a younger version of himself, but he is finding ways to like slightly and subtly kind of age into different roles, even if they are still hearkening back to a youthful persona.
Yeah.
I think he's just really skilled at that.
I mean, I think I probably even started with something like Edge of Tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think there is something about him now. It's continuing to be fascinating where he just seems like, yeah, he is more cognitive of the fact that he's now like a 61-year-old man. He's probably in his late 50s when he filmed this, but like, even still, like, like acknowledging, the aging, the fact that he is, he can't be jumping off of cliffs or flying off of trains forever. But he's also like still Tom Cruise, and he's I don't know if he's going to like transition into like maybe elder statesman supporting roles in like Oscar nominated films after this, or like what's the game plan. But yeah, it again, I feel like this kind of represents the next fascinating chapter in his ever withstanding film career.
He can do whatever he wants, but I just want another Tropic Thunder type performance. That's the only thing. If I just want that, and then yeah, make your movies, dude. You can do whatever. Make another Top Gun. I don't care. But okay, so Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. This is, as I already mentioned, it's the 7th film in the franchise. It's the first of a 2-parter. They are claiming that these aren't going to be the last 2 Mission Impossible movies. We'll see about that. I mean, I don't know. Anything can happen. These are big budget movies. These are movies that I think are kind of a dying breed, honestly. I don't know if you saw the reported budget for Part 1, but it's $291 million, one of the biggest budgets of the year. And I do think that it'll make a lot of money, but it also is coming out in the second week of July, and it's also coming out on the heels, sandwiched in between a massively like overloaded June summer season with lots of big movies coming out of June. And then also we have Barbie and Oppenheimer about to take hold of next week's box office. So I am a little bit skeptical. I do wonder, honestly, why they decided to release this when they did. I know that they probably were working off of a specific timeline, but especially after Top Gun Maverick hit in Memorial Day weekend last year, and I mean, just completely dominated the summer. This movie could have done that again, theoretically, because I think that this movie and Top Gun Maverick have very similar types of audiences. The difference being, and we don't talk about this too much, right, is that the Mission Impossible movies have never been massive earners. I think Fallout definitely started to turn the tide on that in a similar way as like Top Gun Maverick was like kind of a cementing of like Tom Cruise's like box office appeal in sort of a post-pandemic lockdown kind of environment. Fallout, by contrast, did make, I think, more money than any of the other movies, $791 million. So I see that as sort of like them kind of making an interesting gamble with Dead Reckoning, being like, all right, so we can push that even further. It's too early for you or I to say how it's going to do. We're recording this really before the movie has rolled out in a meaningful way. It's only made about like 2.5 million so far at the box office, but through preview screenings. So we're going to find out, and then you and I will probably we'll be able to catch up on how this movie is doing in the box office scheme of things. I expect it'll do fine. I do question the timing and the release schedule of this, and how many other movies are going to be competing with it. Although that said, I mean, we just talked about Joyride. Insidious made, it had a pretty modest opening weekend. It's not like people don't have, like, I guess it is a newer movie that is pretty big, and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny ended up not, really taking off, right, in terms of box office. So, maybe this is the one that's going to break through. As for the story, yes, Tom Cruise is in it. You guessed right. We also have Ving Rhames coming back. Of course, he's in all of these. Has got to be.
Yeah.
It's required.
Luther.
Yeah, Luther, obviously fan favorite character. Him and Simon Pegg. I love that Simon Pegg has been along for the ride in these for a long time now. Truly one of my favorite duos in any kind of spy thriller, or Ving Rhames and Simon Pegg. Benji, that's right.
Did you hear that apparently that role almost went to Ricky Gervais?
Mm-hmm. It's like a bizarro timeline, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's another thing. If I can add one more note to the Tom Cruise conversation, he's good at surrounding himself with people who, I don't know, I think there's like a balance between a guy like Simon Pegg, a guy like Ving Rhames, Christopher McQuarrie, like people who are like, I don't know, they're not yes men necessarily. You could maybe make that case for McQuarrie, but you just get the sense that he surrounds himself with people that like he respects and who kind of respect him and are able to sort of like, I don't know, have like a working relationship with him as a creative talent that isn't extremely top-sided or lopsided or top-heavy, however you want to say it. That's the vibe I get.
Yeah, I mean, with McQuarrie, maybe we'll get into this a little bit more, but like there is something about him where he is definitely very talented, not only as a writer, but as a filmmaker and as an action filmmaker. And I think he works really well with Tom Cruise. They have a very kind of simpatico relationship. But there is also something where I feel like I do want Tom Cruise to kind of go back to like when he was like working with like auteurs, not only the Mission Impossible ones like John Woo and Brian De Palma and stuff, but
get out of his comfort zone a little bit.
But yeah, I mean, you know, he used to work with like Stanley Kubrick and Paul Thomas Anderson and, you know, Michael Mann, like all these like, you know, well-known directors. I feel like that is something that has kind of been lost in the recent years. I don't know if that's going to come back. I feel like he's just kind of been working with like guys he can trust, like Joseph, what's the name of the guy that did Top Gun and Oblivion? Joseph, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but
Kaczynski,
yes, yeah, and then like man, I'm not good with names today. The Edge of Tomorrow director as well.
Oh, Doug Liman.
Yeah. It seems like he is kind of in like a comfort zone. Like he like trusts certain people, and that's fine. Like I think
both those movies you just mentioned, McQuarrie was a writer, so
right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's efficient. Like I think he's been very good as a producer, being like producing slick, you know, well-oiled machines as films. But I do wish that, you know, as he, you know, kind of gets out of the action franchise, that he kind of goes, you know, into something a little bit more audacious. But yeah, I mean, I feel like the last time he even like worked with a different type of director was Alex Kurtzman in The Mummy. So yeah, maybe that's why.
But again, Christopher McQuarrie wrote The Mummy.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, honestly, McQuarrie and Cruise, for people who don't know, McQuarrie wrote The Usual Suspects. So like when you say he's a talented writer, like we can't undersell that. But I mean, he's been working with Cruise going all the way back to like Valkyrie, right? So they have been like, you know, kind of a bit of a duo, like definitely in the same sphere for a long, long time. And the producing stuff is more recent. I think like first time. I mean, I think McQuarrie produced Valkyrie, but didn't produce a lot of the movies we just mentioned, including some Mission Impossible movies. But I mean, he's had his hands in, you know, even some of the stuff like American Made, I think we talked about on the show. And I think, you know, he's been producing these Mission Impossible movies since Fallout. So look, I think the point is McQuarrie is a talented guy. I think that he is an agreeable guy. I think he kind of just knows how to like work with Cruise, give Cruise what he wants, but also like make a good film out of it. And that is like an understated talent, I think, in Hollywood. You have to understand how to say yes and no to people, but also without poisoning those like relationships. So that's my main point. But anyway, Dead Reckoning, the plot of this movie, it opens with a submarine set piece that is very, I don't know how it's going to hit for people that are a few more weeks removed from the whole like Titan/Titanic sub thing. But when I watched this movie, it was a while ago, and it was like literally that week. So it was kind of bizarre because I didn't know that scene was going to happen, and I was like, wait, what? What? How did they plan this? Very different scene, of course, but it's just funny that it's like the first like submarine incident in like a century, and like it happened. You know, this Mission Impossible movie just happened to have that as its opening, as its cold open. So I thought that was kind of, you know, literal cold open because it's in
And you also, I don't know, fitting or poor choice words when you said how it's going to hit with people.
I mean,
nevertheless,
it would have been worse if I had said like if it had imploded, you know,
right.
for people.
But no, nevertheless, yeah, I mean, it's obviously going for like a Hunt for Red October vibe. And it's like a fun opening, but yeah, I mean, that
It
is.
feels a little bit more at home with like the Brian De Palma movie, honestly.
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole movie does. I mean, that's why I think
The writing does, and then the set pieces. You would say the direction. I would say the kind of plot and story, but I mean the direction I think are still pretty like prototypical McQuarrie.
No, I mean, I mean, well, sure. I mean, I think it's on their mind, but like, obviously, bringing Kittredge back. There's like a ton of Dutch angles in this one.
Yes.
There is this kind of sense of like constantly being watched and surveyed, and like not really knowing who is after you and stuff. That's very evocative of De Palma and that first film. Also, just like the knife.
That's what I mean. The story, but I mean, aside from the Dutch angles, I don't think the direction is necessarily like right out of. I mean, I know there is a whole like train sequence that you can kind of like extrapolate, and I totally get that. But yeah, and I was going to mention Kittredge does come back in this. Henry Czerny's character. We haven't seen him since the 1996 film, so kind of wild to see him come back in this. I'll admit, there were a lot of things in this movie where I was genuinely like, I just did not remember what happened in Fallout. And I want to give Dead Reckoning this. Fallout is still my favorite of these movies because I just think it's a set piece spectacle machine that is like unrivaled to most blockbusters. Mm-hmm. And while I think this movie, it's almost like Fallout is like the peak of that mountain. And this movie's just a little bit below that. I think that it's a step down in some ways, but it's still that high. Like we're still pretty high up. But I do think the story in this, the whole MacGuffin, a lot of the stuff we already talked about with like the AI sort of thing and what they're hunting for. And like you mentioned, that the paranoia that's kind of wrapped into this film, I find it more memorable. And I do, and I'll put this to the test, obviously, when we watch the next one, but it has been 5 years since Fallout. I genuinely forgot that Vanessa Kirby was in these movies. Like I really did. And that's not to say anything against Vanessa Kirby. I think I'm just more aware of Kirby as an actress too these days than I was in 18. I think like I just knew her from The Crown back then, but she's made a lot of great stuff in the last 5 years.
I didn't forget about her. I the only thing I had to remember was that like she's related to Max, Vanessa Redgrave's character from the first one.
Right. I just did not remember that whatsoever. And I forgot like where we were at with Rebecca Ferguson. I was like, are she and Ethan like doing anything? Like, is it a relationship? It's the most like platonic paramour coupling in I think like any spy movie I think I've ever seen.
I mean, yeah, I get what you're saying. The thing that I found kind of confusing is that like they brought back Michelle Monaghan for the last one for Fallout, and I feel like it's just weird that like not only is she just like not mentioned or like alluded to at all in this movie.
I didn't find that weird. I found that expected. I think that they were like, we need to tie a bow on that in the last movie and then leave room for the rest. And this movie kind of just it does kind of hark upon it in the sense that like Ethan Hunt's like track record with, you know, female friends is pretty bad.
Well, certainly with beautiful brunettes, at least. Mm-hmm. But no, I mean, I just, it was a little confusing to me because there is like you're kind of suggesting like a tinge of like romanticism with Rebecca Ferguson, even with Hayley Atwell in this, and I just wasn't 100% sure. Like, are we supposed to find this like romantic, or is this kind of just like you said, more platonic? Is Michelle Monaghan still in the picture? Like, is he like? Because there's like the suggestion in Fallout that he's like thinking about settling down and like kind of going back to his his roots, like trying to establish a home life. And then like when the beginning of this movie, there's like this sense of like this long lingering romantic tragedy with, of course, another beautiful brunette that kind of informs the new villain of the film. I don't know. I kind of want to just like even just something that kind of just acknowledged that. I felt it was just a little odd to leave it absent, but it's not like a huge fault or anything. Just something to kind of nod at me throughout the film.
Honestly, I can't say it really struck me whatsoever. The things that struck me about this movie on the positive end, I think the addition of Hayley Atwell, great. I think that she's terrific to watch in this. I think that she's a bit of like a Catwoman type archetype kind of character. She has her own twist to it, but she's just way more exciting to watch. It reminds me of when Ferguson's character was introduced in Rogue Nation. And I think that they just haven't been able to like fully pay off that character from Rogue Nation since then. And so by the time we get to here, I think Ferguson's been kind of put to the sidelines. Like she's in the movie, but like she's definitely not a strong presence. Like she's not she doesn't factor into the energy of the plot the way that Atwell does. And you can see that Atwell is kind of being positioned as, you know, endgame in terms of like the person that, but in two roles, like a passing of the torch and a sort of like the person who can make Ethan Hunt feel feelings, I guess. I don't know. But on the bad end of that, I think Esai Morales, and I've seen some people say that they love this guy as the villain here. You know, he's been in great stuff. Don't get me wrong, I Bad Boys and all that, but I found him to be like profoundly boring in this as a villain. I was like, wow, like this really, I think we've gotten used to pretty like, you know, not Philip Seymour Hoffman type villains. I mean, there's not been a villain since Mission Impossible 3 that has really stood out to me that much. Rogue Nation, I think, is okay in that regard.
No, I mean, I would say, I mean, I don't know if you consider him like a true villain, but I do really like Henry Cavill in Fallout, and especially in like the third act where he like serves like the sort of main.
I like Cavill in general in that movie, but as a villain, yeah, I can't. Maybe when I rewatch Fallout, I'll be there with you. But also Esai Morales. I mean, I'm happy to see a Puerto Rican actor, you know, doing good work. So I do want to put it out there that I'm on his side. But I don't know. I found his performance in this movie to be just really like one note and uninteresting, and it's not his fault. I think it's just sort of like, I don't know. He just kind of comes across to me like he's going to be more important in the next movie. Just wait. You know what I mean? And in this, he's just kind of like gliding along until things happen. Kind of similar deal with like Pom Klementieff, who I said in my review is like really just kind of doing what she did in Thunder Force. Remember Thunder Force?
No.
She played this like silent assassin with like blonde hair in Thunder Force, right? And she's just kind of doing the same thing again in this one. What?
I saw Thunder Force. Gun to my head, I could not have told you that he was in that film.
I don't blame you. I'm not gonna. I could literally like I just Googled like her still from the movie, and like legitimately I can show this to you and you'll be like, oh my god. She's like literally it's like the same performance. But anyway, okay.
No, I mean I definitely gotta disagree with Esai Morales and Pom.
What is it? I want to know what it is that people like about this character / performance, because I you're not alone. Other people have been like, oh, it's great.
Sure, yeah. Well, for one, I mean, as a kind of olive branch, I will say it does hit one of my kind of villainy pet peeves, at least with franchises, where I don't like really when movies do like the like, oh, we're going to introduce a character in the 11th hour, but like he's been this important character this whole time. Mm-hmm. We just haven't seen him at all because we never even talked about him or alluded to him or referenced him. Now he's super important. He's like the be all end all. I don't really like when franchises do that in general, and that's kind of a pet peeve for mine with this film. But no, I mean, I really like that with past Mission Impossible villains. I mean, at least the ones that stand out, like we were mentioning, like John Voight and Philip Seymour Hoffman, especially. Like I like that there is a kind of coldness to it, but there's also like a thrill to it. Like there's this kind of like sense of like being very like driven by it, but also kind of relishing it. And I think this character kind of captures that as well. But there is a resolve to it in the sense that I do like that he is just like solely unrelenting to like let Ethan like live a peaceful and meaningful life. Yeah, I mean, it does very much harken back to Philip Seymour Hoffman. It is not as good as that performance or that character, I think, but I don't know. It was just nice to see a villain that actually stood out to me. Like you mentioned, like I feel like that's been a big failure of the more recent Mission Impossible movies, especially Ghost Protocol. I feel like not having a memorable villain in that movie, and also, I mean, Rogue Nation. Like I think that's what kind of prevents those movies from kind of
Rogue Nation had a good idea for its villain, but it just didn't have a good execution. I think because I just don't think the actor was able to really like stick out the way that Hoffman. Like I think you could have had like Hoffman playing that role in a Bizarro world, and he would have made that movie will be like, wow, this has the best villain. I just think the actor. I don't remember the actor. That's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing like in a perfect timeline. I don't remember if Philip Seymour Hoffman's character died at the end of.
Pretty sure he did, but Spoilers for Mission Impossible 3, which came out in 2006 or whatever.
Look. Not that there are people who aren't going to listen to this who haven't watched the Mission Impossible movies, but I'm going to assume anyone that's listening to this has at least seen the last 6 Mission Impossible movies.
You know what I mean, right? But hey, look, since you mentioned Jon Voight, I was going to bring this up, but Tom Cruise is now older than Jon Voight was when they made Mission Impossible, right? Because he was 58, Jon Voight, in 1996.
Yeah.
Which it's just one of those things, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that rewatching, not that exactly, but a similar thing when I was rewatching Kingdom of Crystal Skull leading up to Dial of Destiny. And I think he was like 65 when that came out or when he was making it. And people are like, can you even imagine an Indiana Jones that's like in his 60s? And now we have like an Ethan Hunt that's in his 50s. And I feel like it's not even like mentioned or discussed really outside of this little like factoid that you just mentioned. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that's why I'm under the assumption that like at least the Tom Cruise era of the Mission Impossible franchise has to end with Dead Reckoning. Obviously, as you mentioned, there is a passing of the torch, I think. I mean, I think it's a lot better handled with Hayley Atwell's character in this film than it is with Jeremy Renner with Ghost Protocol. Though I feel like there's something pretty genuine here in a way that I feel like it's not his fault, but I think Jeremy Renner's like passing the torch was more of like a Paramount decision. It kind of felt like we're only really going to do this if you can kind of usher in a someone that could kind of take over the franchise because Tom Cruise at that point wasn't a like absolute certainty as far as his like renewed star power or whatnot. So yeah, I mean, I do think, as you were saying, that the dynamic there and the chemistry between those two really stands out. And I think that's definitely one of the best aspects of this film. But going back to what you were saying before, I mean, I really thought Pom Klementieff was, like just for what she needed to be, I thought she was a captivating presence. I thought her chase scene throughout the like kind of middle section of this film was so much fun. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what you took issue with her per se.
I think she's just a poorly written character that is like, it's just a carbon copy of a performance she's done before. And I don't think it's her fault. I just think that she's written to be boring, honestly. Like, I don't know. She's not that compelling to me. But I mean, yeah, she's in a chase scene and she like looks angry when she's driving a car. Like, okay.
Yeah, you're underselling it. I'm sorry. This movie
okay. She has a teardrop tattoo at one point. It's really cool.
Well, I'm sorry.
I was on the edge of my seat.
I'm sorry this movie didn't live up to Thunder Force for you, but
that's a problem. It's too similar. No, I think it does kind of hark upon though, like how like there are some like fist fight scenes in this that I don't think really work because of Cruise's age, and she's part of like one of them, and it feels really stiff and weirdly constructed because it's like, well, we got to have a sort of fisticuffs kind of thing happening here, and it just doesn't. I don't know. It just doesn't look right. I like the staging of it because they're in this like really narrow sort of like alleyway, and you're like, whoa, okay, like what's going to happen? Like he can't get out, he can't dodge. Like this is going to be a real brawl, and then I don't know. It just doesn't quite work for me at all. Like I don't know. It was very like the way that they had to pull it off. I think because like he can only do so much. I don't know. It was a bit of a letdown for me.
I don't know if that was the staging or even Cruise per se. I do think one of the faults, and I like that scene fine. It's not like my favorite in the movie or anything, but I thought it was sterling. But I do think what you're talking about does kind of harken to, I think, one of the bigger issues with the movie, which is probably the cinematography. I know like with the last few Mission Impossible movies, like we had Robert Elswit for Rogue Nation, and then I think we had like Rob Hardy, who was like Alex Garland's go-to DP for Fallout. And this one, I don't know the guy's name off the top of my head. I apologize.
It's Fraser Taggart.
Okay, I know this is like his first like major movie as a DP. I think he's done like a lot of work on other films in like various capacities.
He hasn't worked on a ton of films. He worked on John Wick Chapter 2. Okay. He was one of the one of the cinematographers with Dan Lauston.
I was gonna say, I mean, I imagine I did wonder when that party scene happened, I think in their head they're kind of like, oh, this will be like kind of a nice callback to like Eyes Wide Shut or something. But in my head, I'm just kind of like, is this like happening around the same place that that big party scene happened in John Wick Chapter 2?
I had the exact same thought. Yeah, no, it's unmistakable, isn't it? It very much is like, I don't think enough has been said about how these Mission Impossible movies do kind of like bounce off of John Wick in some interesting ways, because John Wick comes out in 2014, a couple years after Ghost Protocol. Rogue Nation comes out not long after, and the kind of both movies have been kind of going down this same highway in the last 10 years of like trying to like one up like stunt filmmaking in ways that were a little bit less reliably seen right before the first John Wick movie, I'd say.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I maintain that John Wick has been good for the action genre. Mm-hmm. It's forced people to kind of step up their game and produce better, more memorable action scenes. I mean, not every movie that's a knockoff of John Wick is going to be the best, but it's certainly
Atomic
better.
Blonde.
I think that's fine. I think there are certainly other examples you could have pulled there, notably worse. But yeah, no, I mean, I do think compared to something like Taken and the influence that movie had, I think it's certainly been more beneficial to the genre. But anyway, I was going to say with the cinematography, even though I do really appreciate the effort here to kind of harken back to the first movie, to De Palma's stylistic way of filmmaking, I just feel like the cinematography here just isn't quite as sharp as the previous, more recent installments. I think it also kind of has to do with this being the first one shot digitally, which, I'm not against digital in general, but I think there is just a general kind of coldness to the frame in this one that I don't know if it's intentional or not. My charitable read of it is that it's deliberate for like all the AI in the sense of like using technology to kind of have like this kind of colder, more menacing demeanor. But I think it was probably more of a budgetary thing. Ultimately,
I'm curious because you watched this in Dolby. I watched this in a standard. I don't know how different the two formats must have been.
I don't know. I mean, compared to at least like the last three Mission Impossible movies, I just feel like the visuals of this aren't quite as strong. But it's not to say it's like an ugly movie or anything.
I'm just saying I was thinking the same thing, but I wasn't sure because Fallout, I remember seeing that Dolby IMAX. So I wasn't sure if, I was watching Dead Reckoning Part 1 in a less optimal format that was kind of painting my impression.
No, I mean, I even like from the first scene, I was kind of like, something's a little off here this time around visually. And I had remembered hearing that this was like the first one shot digitally.
Well, were you thinking that it was maybe a combination of that and COVID? Because they had to shut down like during COVID, right? Or no, they were filming during lockdown.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I don't know. I really don't know.
There was so we should say there was a whole thing where like Cruise got in a little bit of hot water because there's like an audio recording where he's like shouting at people for not following COVID protocols. And so there was I think with that people refer to him kind of like he was acting like his Tropic Thunder character. That was a fun time.
Yeah, I mean, I did remember reading an article about like just how hectic this production was. At least for this film, I don't know if they, like you said, I think they shot both these together, but I'm not 100% sure.
They originally were going to. I looked this up since we brought it up. They didn't. They filmed the first one and then they filmed the second one something like a year or so later ish, more in like 2022.
Okay. But I mean, I think I even remember hearing that like McQuarrie was in the hospital at one point with COVID or something, and I think a lot of people actually got COVID from this production because it was like fairly early on, like you said, in lockdown and throughout lockdown.
It was before vaccines, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was their mission, and they chose to accept it, and we have the film. There you go.
We haven't really said what we think of the movie, I guess, right? Or we haven't really been more general, right? We've kind of just poked at like little things here and there. I hope I haven't sounded like I'm too negative on this one. I think, I mean, I meant what I said when I said that it's like on the spectacle side, it's just a notch below Fallout, which is still, such a great movie that I'm happy with what we got here. I think my thing with this is I keep comparing it to Fast 10. And this is one of like several part 1 movies we've gotten this summer, Fast 10 being one of the big ones, and of course Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse being another. I think Across the Spider-Verse was a good part 1 in the sense where I felt like at the end of that movie, it did feel like there's more, it does feel like an interruption, but I think the preceding movie is so good and it has such a good lead up to that ending that I think that it pays off, or it pulls it off in a way that has me hyped for the next one, not necessarily, disappointed that the movie's over. Fast 10 is more interesting because that's a movie where it ends and it feels a little bit more of like the Avengers Infinity War kind of part 1, where you can kind of look at it and be like, it kind of just told a story here where it ends and the villain wins. And then the second movie is going to be, the Empire Strikes Back, the good guys strike back, whatever. I think the reason I keep comparing this part 1 to Fast 10 is that I think Fast 10 is better at 2 things here. Now, Fast 10 doesn't have nearly, it's not a better movie. I'll just be super clear about that. This movie is much more thrilling and entertaining and better at what it's trying to do. It has a better car chase scene than any car chase scene in Fast 10. But I do think Fast 10 has a way more fun villain, more memorable villain than Jason Momoa. And I do think that the note Fast 10 ends on is a bit more of a gut punch. I think this movie ends with a really cool set piece, but then it just kind of limps away. I just feel like this movie was missing something from its ending. I just didn't feel like, oh man, I can't wait for part 2. I felt a little bit more like, I guess there'll be a part 2 because we do have to tie up some loose ends here, I guess. I don't know. It just didn't feel as elegant to me.
Yeah, I gotta disagree with you again. I thought with Fast X, the ending, it just kind of felt like an interruption. Like it was just kind of like, that's it for now. We'll catch up with you later at some point. It didn't really feel like a super, I know it was going for like a literal cliffhanger there in the same way this movie is, without giving too much away about the third act. But yeah, I felt like that movie just kind of annoyed me as far as how it ended. I get that it was going for the Infinity War type of conclusion, but it didn't feel as earned to me. With Spider-Verse, I think that's a better film overall, and I like the last note ends on, but I think that movie kind of suffers from I kept feeling like, okay, and here's the ending.
Yeah. It just kept ending over and over again.
The end. Nope, we're still going.
Yeah.
Here is the no, and then yeah. But this one I feel like it's good about feeling resolute. Like there is a conclusion to it, but there is more to come, and I think it's it made me want to keep watching more. It was like, okay, I'm excited. Even though I think Spider-Verse is obviously the best of these 3 films that we're mentioning. I do feel like, this is the best about being a part 1 and feeling like a thrilling, first chapter and standing out on its own merits. So, I don't really take issues that the ones that you have, at least, but I do think a part of that just comes down to how much I find the third act of this film to be so much fun. And the train set piece, while obviously evocative of the first movie and a lot of kind of obvious and winking waves, also kind of built up to this big, set piece chase that is just so inventive and so fun. And it's one of my favorite kind of set pieces from any of these movies, I think. So I don't know. I think that definitely saves it for me. But yeah, I don't know. We just disagree.
I mean, what else is new, right? I can't say that I am terribly surprised that we disagree on a Tom Cruise movie, I guess.
But I mean, with that said, I mean, if we want to be a little bit more even keel, I do think, and this is more, I think, to say with the franchise altogether, I would say it's probably more middle of the pack. If you were talking about rankings earlier, I don't think this reaches quite the same heights as Fallout. I don't think it's as good as Rogue Nation or Ghost Protocol. And I still would probably put the first one above this one, but I do think, being the middle pack of this franchise is not a demotion. It's just a testament to how good the recent Mission Impossible movies have been of late, and how much Tom Cruise just really goes buck wild with these movies, and really just kind of puts his all into them. Yeah, I mean, I think by like this summer standards, it's definitely one of the highlights, and I think this movie gave me the thrills that I wanted from Dial of Destiny. I feel like it's like pretty night and day as far as like how the action scenes are choreographed, how thrilling they are, how much fun is in it, and just how funny they can be as well. Compared to I think what was kind of sluggish and you know, overlong about the action scenes in Dial of Destiny. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I get your complaints. I get some of them at least. I don't get other ones, but I don't know. I still just had a really good time, and you know, whatever issues I have, it's still just a good popcorn flick.
I had a good time too. I wrote a positive review. I think that I stand by what I've said before. I said it when we talked about Mission Impossible Fallout. Every single one of these movies is the best of these movies at least one thing. And I think that we've already talked about some of those things here. You know, Mission Impossible 3, best villain. I think Fallout, best set pieces. I think Rogue Nation, probably the best construction of a villain. You know, it's just each one has something to it. Even Mission Impossible 2, I think in all of its John Woo weirdness, has something to it that's kind of almost like charming in how weird it is. I think with this movie, I'm still struggling on pinpointing exactly what it's the best at, but I do think it's probably in the Hayley Atwell character, because I think that she just sort of represents that feeling that these movies still have new territory to uncover, that they can still keep innovating and still keep finding new things to surprise us with. And if I'm ever harsh with these movies, it's only because they do set such a high standard, and I'm thrilled that they set a high standard, that we can ask so much from Mission Impossible movies. I sometimes have to remind myself how that was never a guarantee, right? Growing up with these movies the way we both did, it's not like we knew that this was like a full-on franchise really until I think Rogue Nation and all of that, because the second Mission Impossible movie I watched a ton, right? I that was like a movie that I remember watching the second one, and it came out when I was around 10 years old, and I was just obsessed with it, because I was coming off of the high of being obsessed with James Bond movies for the first time. You know, GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough. These movies were coming out. Pierce Brosnan was my James Bond, right? And then here comes Tom Cruise, like in this like really like, you know, kick butt sort of action franchise with like flames on the poster. It was super cool to 10-year-old John. And I just never remember, I don't remember actually going through like my middle school and high school years expecting more Mission Impossible movies the way that I expected James Bond movies. But they just continue to come back, and they continue to be like, oh man, here's Mission Impossible 3. Here's this like really thrilling sort of interrogation sequence. Here's Ghost Protocol with this like incredibly good trailer, you know, that I didn't know there was going to be another Mission Impossible movie. I thought they were done. And then sure enough, they come back with Rogue Nation, and it's like, whoa, like the set pieces are on a totally different level now. So I certainly am enthusiastic about these movies all day, every day. If anything, I hope that they end it with part 2, because I think that they have the chance to end it on like a good note, in a way that like really wraps up this franchise in its current form and leaves it alone for a while. I think that was the thing that this franchise has benefited the most, has been when it takes those pauses. And to your point, I think that if they do bring it back, I mean, I'd love to see another director. I'd love to see somebody like another kind of Brad Bird, J.J. Abrams, like somebody come back to do this that hasn't done it before, because Mission Impossible has a lot of potential to it. There's a lot of characters in this like world they've created, and they can keep coming back and doing their thing. My only stipulation is like, yeah, you got to have Ving Rhames in it. But other than that, I mean, do what you want to do. So I have a few Letterboxd reviews to read out. So I feel like we said our piece. I have a negative one, a kind of middle one, and a very positive one. Which one do you want me to start with?
Let's go with the middle. Somebody that can be a peaceful mitigator between us.
And look, middle is in this case a 3.5. So because the reviews, most of the reviews I found were extremely like positive. So this is the middling one. This is from Marmar. I fear this franchise has peaked with Fallout. Sadly, not even Tom Cruise jumping off a cliff from a motorcycle was able to win me over. Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, and Fallout are the best ones because they're easy to follow. directed meticulously and focused heavily on perfecting the action stunt choreography. This is the other way around, too plot heavy, too long for its own good, and none of the action set pieces stood out at all. Disappointment does not feel great in a place like this. I agree with some of this, but the thing I disagree with is I don't think it's too plot heavy. If anything, the plot kind of saves this movie for me. It's what keeps me more interested in it. Do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with Fallout and with this one, like, there's a sense that I get that, like, they're kind of, not like winging it, but like, they're kind of flying by the seat of their pants. Like, I remember hearing that, like, the script for Fallout when they were filming it was kind of like in shambles and just like constantly changing. And I kind of get the sense, like, with lockdown and all the issues that befell this movie, that it had kind of a similar thing. But I didn't really take issue with the story of it. I think it served the film as much as it needed to. I feel like the story is usually kind of a means to an end. With this film, it's like kind of connecting the set pieces, kind of keeping us along, getting the characters together, or, you know, kind of building tension or whatever. But as far as the action set pieces go, to their comment, I do think, as we were kind of alluding to, one of the bigger issues with this movie is that there is a kind of sameness to it. As far as the Mission Impossible movies go, that, like, I feel like this one might get kind of muddled, you know, in the series. Like, I feel like each one has like very distinctive visuals and set pieces that, like, whether I love the movie or not, like, I'm like, oh, you know, like Tom Cruise, like, riding that motorcycle, that's Mission Impossible 2 or whatever, you know, like stuff like that. Or like Tom Cruise hanging off the tallest building, that's Ghost Protocol or whatever.
Yeah. Well, this one I think has its sort of like Uncharted 2 sort of thing with the train falling off. I think that's the one that like sticks out to me the most.
Of course, yeah. And that's going to be probably the set piece I think back on the most when I think of this movie, for sure.
And by the way, I'm referring to Uncharted 2, the video game, which is considered the best of the series. Probably is, anyway.
Yeah, if you say so. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I get where they're coming from. I don't think this is as good as Fallout, but yeah, I can understand that complaint.
Let's do the negative review next. This is from Griffin Schiller, fun mutual of ours, so aware of his work. But Griffin said, a bit unsure leaving Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, but it's the closest we've gotten to late Connery and more Bond in a while. Enjoyed the weirdness, heightened spycraft, thrilling action, but for as thrilling as the action is, some of the set pieces aren't as impressive as you would think. Fiat chase is bizarrely paced and executed. The hand-to-hand combat flat, that part I do agree with. Some very noticeable green screen work in the climax that takes away from an incredible train sequence. The central dilemma of AI is also horribly fumbled and completely misunderstands the battle we face. Plus, there's an unforgivable decision / character assassination that positively irked me. I also have to say the handling of the female characters was so deeply strange and off-putting. It's hard to discuss without getting into spoilers, but let's just say there are echoes to Cruise's own personal romantic relationships that come across as him trying to justify all the questionable shit he did in them. I'm also just left with a ton of questions and muddled character motivations, which is fine. Some of these problems may be resolved in Part 2, but more than most of the Part 1s released as of late, Across the Spider-Verse, Dune, Dead Reckoning really suffers from feeling like an incomplete story right up there with Fast 10. Part 1 simply does not function effectively as a story, and even if it is half of a 2 larger, a movie still needs to stand on its own. There's a difference between a sequel with a cliffhanger and an incomplete story, and I don't think being a Part 1 should excuse a movie from not functioning as a movie on its own. Probably my least favorite Mission Impossible, sadly. I agree with a lot of it. A lot of what Griffin is saying here, honestly. I think the stuff with the female characters, we touched on it, but yeah. I mean, it really, like, off-putting is the word for it, and I do agree that, like, the AI stuff, I like that it's in the movie. I'm kind of giving the movie the benefit of the doubt for the next one. I do think that, like, the whole construct of, like, AI is this, like, deeply dangerous, horrible, like, you know, I'm glad that they replaced the whole, like, nuclear bomb stuff with AI because it's a more interesting dilemma for the characters. And I like that it's setting up this idea of how, I mean, in the real world, AI is this sort of, like, kind of, it's this thing that, like, we don't fully understand, but, like, everyone just kind of wants to control it instead of, like, solve a potential series of problems. You know what I mean? I think the movie does kind of get into that. And so I don't totally agree with the whole thing of, like, oh, it doesn't understand the issues with AI. I guess it's a sanitized version of it. It is kind of superficial about it, to his credit.
Sure, I guess. I don't know. I mean, there is one scene where, like, without giving anything away, like AI sort of infiltrates like a mission, and I love that two characters, to try to solve it, just like throw their laptops in the ground. It kind of, in like NCIS, there's like that one scene. Maybe it's not NCIS. There's some CBS procedural drama where like they need to like code faster than ever. So like someone's just like typing as fast as they can on a keyboard, and someone's like pacing around behind them, and it's just like, let me get in there. And they're just like both typing on the same keyboard, like trying to do as fast as possible. And it just feels like very like old man trying to tackle technology sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's always very amusing. Other than that, I can't say I agree with a lot of what was said there, but yeah, the green screen unfortunately is kind of noticeable and distracting, especially for a franchise like this that prides itself on being as real and realistic looking as possible. But I think it's handled fine. Like it took me out of some moments, but not enough to distract me from the film overall. I do think, I mean, in this one I'll have to be careful about how I phrase it, but there is a handling of a certain character that I think was kind of muddy. It's considering that like the beginning, I think, kind of fumbles how they're brought back. And then like when like a later scene happens, like I feel like it's kind of muted a little bit because it kind of like out earlier that like I kind of could just see through. So I kind of feel like that scene could have been more powerful if they handled it better, and I think that is one of the weaker elements of the film. But it's I can't say I agree with the rest of the things that they were saying in their review.
We'll finish off with a positive review here. This is from Cinema Joe. Living up to Fallout was always going to be a gargantuan task, which is maybe why I felt like this was the slightest underwhelming. There was no real moment that took my breath away, but is that even a fair standard to measure? In the vacuum of 21st century action film, Dead Reckoning is better than a vast majority of its peers. Well acted, incredible action set pieces, excellent new characters. But in the vacuum of the Mission Impossible franchise, it is missing a certain bite. Maybe it's the loads of exposition in the first half, constantly reminding you they need both keys to verify it's the real key. I found that charming. Well, I don't know about you. Surprisingly, I found the most interesting part was the story's new villain, or less the actual villain, but the film's thesis. It may not be groundbreaking to opine that our over-reliance on technology is dangerous, but in the current state of film, this thesis is operating at a fascinating level. I'm sure there are a lot of fireworks were held back for Dead Reckoning Part 2, a movie I'm certain that will melt our faces off. And ultimately, I mean, a 4-star review. There you go.
Yeah, I think that's the closest of the three you've shared to my feelings on the film.
Yeah, glad we ended on it so we could end on that note. All right, let's play the Mission Impossible Rotten Tomatoes game. We have 273 reviews counted. One of them's mine. So you know I'm in there. You know I'm tinkering. What do you think the critic score is right now?
I think it's going to be high. Probably in the 90s. I don't think it's going to be like 98 or something like that. I think similar to you, I think some people are probably going to have some reservations that they may not have had with the last couple of McQuarrie Mission Impossibles, but nevertheless, I think still very high. I find it hard to believe that people are going to walk out of this being like, that was bad, like not worth the experience, even if they might find it overlong or have other issues with it. So I'm going to say 94%.
You're kind of it's in between your high estimate and your low. It's 96, and I think that to what you're saying, it's like even people who have their criticisms of it, like I do, and those negative / middling reviews that we mentioned, it's like, yeah, it's like it's not enough for people to be like, oh, it's a bad movie. It's just some people have lower scores, but Rotten Tomatoes isn't about the median. You know what I mean? I don't even know what the Metacritic score must be. But okay, audience score, 1,000+ verified ratings. What about audiences? Do you think they're in line? Do you think that's a little different? What's up?
I think, they're probably pretty similar. I'm going to say 97%.
It's more similar than that. It's 95. Just one lower than the critic score, which is kind of surprising, I guess. Maybe some people are like, a lowballing it slightly. Who knows?
Yeah.
We'll do cinema score next. All right. So the folks in Vegas, they have spoken. And what do you think? I mean, do you think this one's gonna? I should look up what the last one was for Fallout. I actually don't remember.
I feel like Fallout was like an A, and I feel like this one's probably going to be like an A minus. You know, like maybe some reservations, but still, just having a good time on the big screen, indulging in sin outside of the casino and all that.
So you're gonna guess A minus?
Yep.
You were right that Fallout got an A, but this one also got an A. Two A's. Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, maybe they'll get a triple A on the third.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually see the Metacritic score here is 81. So it's actually kind of high. All right. And then we'll finish with the Letterboxd rating. Let's see here. How many people have logged it on Letterboxd? That would be 66,000, which is really good considering it's still like in preview screenings. That's more than like Joyride and all that, which not surprising, huh? All right. What do you think the average rating is on Letterboxd?
I think it's officially out now. Like it's on preview screenings.
I think, yeah, as of today. But I think like a lot of people who have watched it so far, who have logged it, have been from the preview screenings, right?
No, it came out on Tuesday.
I thought it came out Wednesday. Whatever. It's only been a couple of days.
Yeah.
It's also in the middle of the week. Do you really expect that many people to watch? Like, it's not like it's a holiday week.
No, but you say that. But I mean, my Dolby screening was, if not sold out, nearly sold out. And it was like a 6:00 showing on a Wednesday.
Yeah, so some people they take happy hour pretty seriously, huh?
Yeah,
sorry, your average rating.
Happy hours, yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna say probably pretty high, like 3.9.
So close. You have been so close on every single guess this week. 4.0.
I'm a man of the people.
Yeah, 4.0,
like
which
Tom
is
Cruise.
That's definitely one of the highest. That's probably the second highest of the summer, after Spider-Man, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go. All right, Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. It is in theaters. I do think that more people will watch it this weekend, and I mean, do you expect it to make more than Fallout?
I
don't know. Like, I kind of want to say yeah, but I just keep thinking of reasons that it might not, honestly, and so I'm a little wishy-washy on that one.
I think it's definitely going to get the Maverick bump. Like, I think people
Maverick Hines.
Yes, the Maverick.
He's going to promote the movie.
The Top Gun Maverick bump and the Maverick Hines bump. Yeah, I mean, I think people have really kind of been won over between like Mission Impossible Fallout and Top Gun Maverick. I think they're really excited for this movie in a way that feels pretty palpable compared to like other movies this summer that have been underperforming and just like haven't really had that much build up or expectations. With that said, I do think, as you were mentioning earlier, that is going to be hurt by coming out like in the dead heat of summer and having to compete not only with Barbie, but like with Oppenheimer taking a lot of the IMAX and presumably Dolby screens for this film.
Mm-hmm.
That will certainly probably hurt the box office in the long run. I know Tom Cruise was like pissed about that. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to do really well. I think it's definitely going to be like top 5 of the summer grosser. I don't think it's going to be as successful as Top Gun Maverick.
No. I highly doubt that. Definitely not domestically, but I shouldn't say definitely. But I mean, it's not coming out at the right time for that to happen. But I'm glad you did bring up though Maverick Hines, since I do remember from our Fallout conversation, he mentioned that like he had never really watched these movies before. And he was kind of like, hey, you know what? Like I'm glad I did. Like I think that it was a nice surprise. Like, oh, here's this action franchise that I never really took seriously. And when he gave it a chance and was like, oh, it's actually really cool. And so, you know, I'm sure there are a lot of people who are like that, honestly, who've like, oh, I've heard of these movies, but it's Tom Cruise, who cares? And they've been kind of, since Rogue Nation and Fallout, have been like steadily getting into them. So I think that's fair to point out. There is a Maverick Hines bump.
Yeah. I have been seeing a lot of people, at least like on my Twitter feed and stuff, been like kind of rediscovering the first Mission Impossible, and probably because of the build up to this one, and just being like, wow, yeah, like that was like a really cool movie. Like I feel like even like 5 years ago when Fallout came out, like I was saying, like people were kind of dismissing and being like, yeah, it's like lower tier Mission Impossible movies, but like now it's like, yeah, you know, really solid stuff. De Palma hit out of the park, and I'm definitely glad. I'm glad I was like almost as fond as I was when I first saw it back when I was like a teenager. So yeah, just a fun franchise, man.
We'll be back next week to talk about Barbie and Oppenheimer, and I think the real question is going to be, you know, which one are we going to talk about first?
Right,
it's going to be a real war.
Yeah, I really don't know because I genuinely don't know which one I'll be able to see first.
Yeah, I know I'll be seeing Barbie first because I'm seeing that Monday, and then Oppenheimer I'm seeing the next day. So it's a Barb Oppenheimer kind of release.
If I was a betting man, I'd presume we're going to do Barbie first, but time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, the letter B comes before O, and also ladies first.
Yeah, and you know what that spells out? BO, which is box office.
It's like, where are you going with this? All right. Well, until then, have a fun vacation. Well, you deserve it.
Hey.
And we'll be back next week to talk about those movies and more. From the Internet, California, I am John Negroni.
And from the Internet, Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton. And this message will self-destruct 5 seconds.
See you next time.